In the African American community today, we have a lot of confusion going on in the community. It's like we're broken down between so many different groups: Muslims, Christians, Nuwabians, Hebrew Israelite, Moors, African Americans, Black. This confusion that's in the community, could you help clean up some of this confusion?
Yes. Most thing that I can do is talk about my family history and the history of the Yuchi Indians of the Savannah River. And the Yuchi Indians deal with two aspects of colonial times. There's a part of my family that was involved with Indian slavery, and there was another part that wasn't. So many people don't understand the dynamics of Native American slavery. And in South Carolina colonial times, Native slaves and Africans, according to the timelines, were on separate plantations. So you have to understand Native American slavery. However, in Virginia in 1682, Virginia decided that Native Americans and Africans would both be placed under the umbrella of Negro. And that's very important for people to understand in colonial times, because those events that happen in colonial times identify us today. But since most people don't understand Native American slavery, and slaves were separate in South Carolina, they assume everyone is African American. And we're not. My family knew our history, and knew our history well. As a child, history was passed on to me. I had the luxury, the honor, and the blessing of spending times with many of my elders as I was growing up. So I knew who I were. But what people need to understand with South Carolina is race reclassification. Who did you reclassify? There are many Native American tribes, and the Yuchi Indians are one of them, who ended up in slavery. And when we were enslaved on our own plantations. As a result of that, many of my ancestors converted to Christianity. Now, I am a forensic genealogist, so I deal with detailed aspects of timelines, colonial records, colonial laws. That is very important. People should always do. And keep in mind, not everybody's story is the same. Not everyone. There are African Americans in this country who are African Americans. I don't identify with it because I am not. I am a Yuchi Indian. My skin color happens to be brown. But remember this, brown and black are colors. They're not necessities. And that's what people need to understand. Many a times in this country, history has been omitted. And folks don't understand what omitted history is. That type of history is history that has been left completely out of the history books. So you have to go on your old stories and know what your old stories are. That is key. Many people don't realize this. So in South Carolina colonial times, when they enslaved the Native Americans and the Africans, my family, the Yuchi Indians along the Savannah River, were enslaved on their own plantations. However, my family history, as documented, goes back to 1725. I have one grandfather, Lan Wanwete, who has a land grant. My land patent here, one second, here is Mar Davis Sheck, who converted to Christianity. My great ancestor, 1773, converted to Christianity, changed his name We were settlement Indians to be left alone in the Savannah River Valley in the area now known as Allendale and Barnwell County. In provinces, Bennett Springs, Martin Millet area. This is where my family is from. And this is one of the documentations that we have to prove who we are. This is just one. My ancestors, a few of them, met with King George II. That's what most people don't understand. My story is not everybody else's story, and everybody else's story is not my story. We just knew who we were. Here's a will of another grandfather of mine. 1801. These things are very significant. And this particular grandfather of mine held many of his cousins as slaves to keep them from being sold off to other plantations, even the Caribbeans. So knowing who you are, even through slavery, my family managed to keep documentations. How did we do it? Because when an elder died, this information was buried in the cemeteries next to them. And whoever took up the light next became the leader of the family. Many of my family, here's our land boundaries, grants, plats of land that was set aside, which was our land in the beginning. But these are the provisions that was made. That's one. Here are other land boundary grants, plats from my family. Here are others from my family. We know who we are. So, as a forensics genealogist, I say to everyone, study, research, colonial records, learn your old stories, study the plantations, study the maps. These things are very important. Study your church records. Because many of your ancestors, during their marriages and common law marriages, as it was at those times, didn't receive marriage certificates. Those marriages were recorded in the churches. Pay very close attention to that. That's very important. Once again, as I said before, study maps, study colonial laws, study timelines, study plantations. Look at the plantation. Study the owner of the plantation. What type of plantation it was. Was it a rice plantation? Was it a cotton plantation? Was it a sugar cane plantation? Was it an indigo plant? All of these things are significant. But keep in mind, the majority of your sugar cane plantations, which my family arrived from, part of them, are your sugar cane Native American plantations. These are your Native American slaves. Very important. So just because your ancestors were reclassified as Negro and placed in slavery, and after slavery, your ancestors still knew who they are and knew who they were. Now, all of us didn't come off the boat. We were slaves who were already here. So that's to keep in mind.
Chief, I had a question.
Yes.
My question is on the term black. We've been hearing the term black ever since I was a little kid. James Brown, Black and I'm Proud, he had a perm in his head. Black power, all of these things never seem to work. What is it about that term black that keeps us in the condition that we're in?
First of all, black is a color. It's not a necessity. It deals with color. Doesn't deal with the ethnic of who you are. It deals with skin color. That's what people should be very careful with and understand it. Brown is a skin color. These things are colors, not your necessity.
And Chief, one more thing. I have never in my life seen nobody who was the color black. I mean, when we say black, it's like the color of my camera is black. The color of some shoes are black. Why are we so engulfed, and why do we take on that color like that's who we really are?
Because that is what was labeled and given to us. You don't find many white folks saying they're white. When you sit down and talk to them, they will tell you they're Scottish, or Irish, or German. That's what they will tell you, or Italian. Why is it that black folks are always talking about black? Where? Do you know what tribe you descend from? My tribes don't descend from Africa. They descend from right here in the Savannah River. Yuchi. Over 1,000 years. That's who we are. Through slavery, we're still here. Jim Crow, we're still here. The 50s and 60s, civil rights, we're still here. And we are here today. Yuchi. That's who we were. That's who we are. That's who we've been. That's who we continue to be. That's who I am today. I am a Yuchi Indian. Whether you want to call me a Yuchi Indian or Yuchi American Indian or Amerindian, I am Yuchi. Tahola, children of the sun. This is who I am in the Savannah River Valley where my people have been for over 1,000 years. We are here. We didn't go to Oklahoma. We stayed and fought. Many of my ancestors have died. We're still here. I still have my practices. We know who we are. This is who we are. So you can call me colored. You can call me Negro. You can call me black. I am a Yuchi Indian.
Chief, could you tell us about how plantations got set up?
Many plantations are no more than Native American villages. These villages became plantations. They became cities. They became townships. Many became towns. That's what they are today. Native American slaves, they came in, raided, and enslaved villages in South Carolina. And a lot of these raids were done by Indian traders. And most folks don't understand Indian traders traded Indians as slaves. That is very important, but it's not looked upon like that in history because people think these men were just trading with the Indians. They were also trading people.
Okay, so bottom line, they conquered the towns and the pieces of earth that the people were already on, and that became a plantation.
That's what I just said.
Okay, Chief, throughout the years we've been known as Indians, colored, blacks, all these other names in the census. My question was, why was it so important for these changes to make effect like they did? You know, like we were Indians at one time and then it turned into colored, black, and all these other names. Why was it so important for us, for these changes to take effect?
First of all, let's deal with 1680, 1682. Virginia reclassification of Negroes, of Native Americans, and Africans who were enslaved. However, that became the norm across the board. Now, let's deal with South Carolina. And what you have to understand, in order to make people extinct, you must remove their identities. And that's what they did. What's the purpose for removing their identity? For the conquering of the land. The indigenous people, the aboriginal people, hold aboriginal title to the land. South Carolina decided, as well as Georgia, for a very long time, for hundreds of years, there are no more Indians in the state. So after the Indian removal, those of us that remain became colored. Now, let's pay very close attention to the term mulatto, which gets a lot of people confused. First of all, the first definition of mulatto dealt from the 1600s up until the mid 1800s was a mulatto was a Native American and a Negro. The offspring of that person was a mulatto. The term they used in those times was a Negro and a Native. Oftentimes you will find it in the dictionary as stating a Native woman or man and a black or Negro. Remember, they're playing with color. So you got to look at the timelines in these different definitions. But after 1924, the mulatto definition changes. Now it is an interracial black and white, as they call it, person. Now, what is significant about that? Because when your ancestors, and you're looking up your ancestors in the 1800s, that particular definition don't even apply. So you have to follow timelines to understand this. That is most important thing about being an effective genealogist. You have to deal with specifics and timelines. Stay away from the Dawes roll because they don't apply to you unless you know your family went to Oklahoma and came back. What you need to deal with is the reclassification of people, racial codes, statute laws. There are hundreds of court cases in the 1700s of people having to defend who they are but being coded as free people of color. Because later in life, the free people of color, they also tied that to the African. But in the colonial times, we're talking about Native people. So why put these two groups of people under the same umbrella? These no more than colonial laws of wanting to write people out of history. But these tribes are still here, and you're looking at one descendant of them.